May 31st, 1223. The Kalka River. 20,000 Mongols, 80,000 Rus and Cumans. By the end of the day, the Russian princes will be slowly dying beneath the floorboards of a victor's banquet. Their bones will snap under the weight of feasting Mongol commanders. The greatest army ever assembled by Kievan Rus will be ground into dust. And 14 years later, the Mongols will return. And 250 years of the Tatar yoke will begin. It all started here, with one perfect plan. This is not just a battle of armies. This is a battle of iron discipline against chaos. This is a battle of a singular, cold genius against a dozen disjointed princes, blinded by envy and a thirst for glory. But this catastrophe was more than just a battle. This is the first chapter in the saga of the greatest strategist you may not even know. A man who conquered more nations than Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Napoleon Bonaparte combined. His name was Subutai, the right hand of Genghis Khan, the son of a blacksmith who became a god of war. This is the first of his 5 greatest battles, and today we are going to deconstruct his absolute tactical masterpiece. How 9 days of pursuit were transformed into a deadly trap. Why the largest army of Rus crumbled in a single hour. And what fatal mistake the Russian princes made that cost them everything. How did Subutai, using only 20,000 horsemen, lure an 80,000-strong army into a 9-day chase across the scorched steppe? How did he turn their confidence into panic, their strength into weakness, and their army into a river of blood? And why did this terrifying defeat at the Kalka predetermine the fiery fate of Rus for the next 2.5 centuries? Watch until the end, because the lesson that the Russian princes failed to learn in 1223 remains relevant today. To understand how 20,000 Mongols ended up on the borders of Rus, we must go back 2 years. The year is 1221. The Khwarezmian Empire, a massive state stretching from India to the Caspian Sea, has fallen under the blows of Genghis Khan. But the conqueror of the world has one unresolved task remaining. His enemies have fled to the west, and Genghis Khan wants to know, what lies there beyond the Caspian? Who lives in these lands? How strong are they? He summoned 2 of his best generals. The first is Jebe, the Arrow. He is 52 years old, ruthless and swift, just like his nickname. He was once an enemy of Genghis Khan. He shot him with an arrow and killed his horse. For his honesty, Genghis Khan forgave him and made him a general. The second is Subutai, the Ba'atar, the hero. He is 47 years old. He was not of royal blood. He was not a Genghisid. He was the son of a simple blacksmith from the Urienkai tribe, but his mind was sharper than any saber. Genghis Khan called them his dogs of war. Their mission? Not conquest, it was reconnaissance, the greatest raid in history, as the historian Edward Gibbon wrote, an expedition that had never before been attempted and has never been repeated. They were given a 20,000-strong expeditionary corps, 2 Cumans, with orders to circle the Caspian Sea, cross the Caucasus Mountains, defeat the Alans and Cumans, and gather intelligence on the peoples living in the West. And they did exactly that. For 2 years they sowed chaos. They smashed through the impregnable Derbent Pass, crushed the Georgian army of Queen Tamar, and then emerged into the Cuman steppes. Here, Subutai applied his classic maneuver, divide and conquer. He convinced the Cumans to betray their allies, the Alans, by promising peace and loot. The Cumans believed him. Together, they destroyed the Alans. And then, once the Alans were annihilated, Subutai turned around and struck the Cumans themselves. The Cuman Khan Kotian, one of the most powerful rulers of the steppe, was utterly defeated. He lost everything: his army, his lands, his livestock. Running for his life, he flees to his son-in-law, Prince Mstislav Mstislavich of Galicia, known by the nickname Mstislav the Bold. This is not a wild horde. This is a perfect military machine. Approximately 20,000 warriors organized into tumans, thousands, and hundreds. Iron discipline. For disobeying an order, death. For cowardice, death to the entire squad of 10. This army possesses unified command. 2 strategic geniuses, Jebe, the arrow, and Subutai, a 47-year-old veteran who has survived dozens of sieges and battles from Beijing to Samarkand. Remember these numbers. They explain everything that follows. Every Mongol warrior has at least 3, and more often 5 horses. That is 60,000, maybe even 100,000 horses for a 20,000-man corps. Unthinkable speed. They could cover up to 100 kilometers a day, swapping mounts every few hours. Add to this the composite bows, effective at 300 meters, a rate of fire of 6 to 8 arrows from each bow. A Mongol horseman carried 60 arrows in 2 quivers. That is 10 minutes of continuous suppression fire. And absolute iron discipline. Every warrior knew his place. Every maneuver was drilled hundreds of times. On the other side, Rus and the Cumans. Their army is massive. Estimates range from 80,000 to 100,000. Although modern historians consider a figure of 40,000 to 50,000 more realistic, it is still a colossal force. This is the flower of the princely družinas, heavy cavalry, encased in chainmail and lamellar armor, warriors with immense combat experience, and tens of thousands of light Cuman horsemen nomads who were tactically similar to the Mongols. But this army has one fatal flaw. It has no head. It has 3 of them at once, and they hate each other. Mstislav the Bold, Prince of Galicia. He is 47 years old. Behind him are 20 victories and 0 defeats. He's brave, daring, charismatic. He's used to enemies fleeing at the mere mention of his name. He thirsts for glory more than life itself. Today, that thirst will kill him. Mstislav Romanovich of Kiev, the Old. He is 58 years old, the most experienced of the princes. Behind him are 23 battles. He has never been defeated. He's cautious, calculating, and does not trust the bold. He will call for caution. No one will hear him. Mstislav Sviatoslavich of Chernigov, a strong prince, but squeezed between the other 2 Mstislavs. He will follow the bold. And one more participant who is destined to play a role. Daniel Romanovich, Prince of Volyn. He is only 22 years old. This will be his first great battle. He's young, furious, full of fire, and he will nearly die at the Kalka. The Russian princes have no unified plan, no single commander. There is only feudal fragmentation, mutual envy, and certainty in their own invincibility. This collision was inevitable. In the spring of 1223, the Cuman Khan Kotian arrives in Galich to see his son-in-law, Mstislav the Bold. He falls at his feet. He begs. As the chronicles report, he brought rich gifts, gold, horses, furs, and spoke words that changed history. Today, the Mongols have taken our land. Tomorrow, they will come and take yours. This plea forces the Russian princes to make a choice. A great council gathers in Kiev, the three most powerful princes. Help the hated Cumans who have raided Russian lands for decades, or wait until the unknown enemy comes to them. Mstislav the Bold utters the fatal phrase, "It is better to meet them on foreign land than on our own." The decision is made. The vast army of southern Rus begins to gather for the campaign. In the spring of 1223, a force gathered on the banks of the Dnieper River, the likes of which Rus had perhaps never seen. Chroniclers speak of 80,000 or even 100,000 warriors, while modern historians lean toward 40 to 50,000. It was essentially a juggernaut. The Kiev regiments of Mstislav the Old, the Chernigov retinues, the Galicians of Mstislav the Bold, the Volhynians of the young Daniel Romanovich, and, of course, thousands of Cuman horsemen thirsting for revenge. It was an army of princes, huge, strong, and tragically divided. They lacked a commander-in-chief. Each prince was his own authority. Mstislav the Bold tore forward, craving glory. Mstislav of Kiev urged caution, suggesting they fortify on the Dnieper and await the enemy. Nobody listened to him. The confidence of the Russian princes was absolute. They were not marching to fight a war. They were marching to punish some unknown nomads who dared to appear in their steppes. Subutai makes a move that most history textbooks skip. He does not sharpen swords. He does not marshal troops. He sends envoys. The first Mongol embassy arrives at the Russian camp. Their words, preserved by chroniclers, were polite and calculated. "We have heard that you are marching against us, having listened to the Cumans, but we have not occupied your land, nor your cities, nor your villages. We have not come for you. We have come for our grooms and serfs, for the vile Cumans. Make peace with us. If the Cumans flee to you, drive them away and take their goods. We have heard that they have done you much evil, which is why we are beating them too." What was this? A sign of weakness? Fear of the massive army? No. It was a final check. Subutai was testing the enemy. He was giving the princes a chance to walk away. He was finding out how reasonable they were, how disciplined they were, how ready for war they were. The princes, confident in their strength and incited by the Cumans, commit a mistake that will go down in history. They don't just reject the peace, they execute the envoys. For the Mongols, whose yasa, the law of Genghis Khan, placed the life of an ambassador above all else, this was not just an insult. An ambassador was sacred. Even if you are at war with an enemy, you do not touch the envoy. To kill an ambassador is the same as declaring war on the heavens themselves. This was a death sentence that the princes signed for themselves. Upon learning of the execution, Subutai does not rage, he does not scream. He laughs, because he has received the answer to all his questions. The enemy is strong, but foolish, brave, but careless, numerous, but divided. Subutai coldly sends a second embassy, but this is no longer an offer of peace. It is a declaration of war. His words have echoed through history. You have listened to the Cumans and killed our envoys, and you march against us. So be it. Come, we have not touched you. God is above us all." The point of no return had been crossed, and Subutai began to execute his plan. After the execution of the envoys, the Mongols turned around and began to retreat. The Russian princes rejoiced. They saw this as fear. They decided that the enemy, these unknown Tatars, were terrified of their combined might and were running away. Mstislav the Bold, true to his nickname and nature, ordered an immediate crossing of the Dnieper to begin the pursuit. He craved to catch the enemy first, to crush them first, to seize the rich loot and all the glory. He did not care for the warnings of Mstislav of Kiev, who advised them to fortify and wait. And Subutai gave them exactly what they wanted. He began to retreat. But this was not a rout. This was not panic. This was a hunt, in which Subutai was the hunter, and the Russian army was the beast being led to the slaughterhouse. The Mongols initiated the greatest tactical maneuver of the campaign. They retreated for 9 days. 9 days through the scorched steppe. 9 days under the blazing sun. The Arab historian Ibn al-Athir wrote that the Rus swiftly pursued the Tatars, thinking that they had retreated out of fear of them, and chased them for 9 days. This was the most brilliant part of Subutai's plan, because he wasn't just retreating, he was dissecting the enemy army. May 23rd. The Cuman cavalry and the advance retinues of Mstislav the Bold fly forward, intoxicated by the chase. They cut down lagging Mongols. They capture abandoned livestock and equipment. It seems to them the enemy is falling apart. The princes are jubilant. May 25th. The chase continues. The army begins to stretch, like a snake being pulled by the tail. The fast cavalry of Mstislav the Bold is far ahead over the horizon. The heavy druzhina of Mstislav of Kiev and his infantry are lagging tens of kilometers behind. There is no communication between the units. Messengers cannot make it in time. Dust obscures the horizon. May 28th. The Mongols retreat masterfully. They run at exactly the speed necessary, so the Rus do not fall behind, but cannot catch up either. They tease, they lure, they exhaust. The Russians are running out of water. The horses are winded. Many troops have lost their formation. Discipline is plummeting. The Mongols, meanwhile, are switching horses every few hours. Every warrior has 5 fresh mounts. They are rested. They are ready. The princes are no longer thinking of tactics. They are thinking only of how to catch the enemy and seize the loot. May 30th. Subutai led them exactly to the place he had chosen. In the evening, Mstislav the Bold's vanguard, exhausted, stretched thin and thirsty, reaches a small river called the Kalka. Today it is the Kalchik River in the Donetsk region. Then it was a nameless steppe stream. On the opposite bank they see the enemy. The Mongols have finally stopped. A small rearguard, no more than 2,000 to 3,000 horsemen, stands on the eastern bank. For Mstislav the Bold, this was a clear sign. Tomorrow he would claim all the glory. Tomorrow he would crush these nomads and return a hero. He did not know that for 9 days he had been led to his execution. He did not know that behind the hills on the other bank, Subutai's main forces, in fresh, combat-ready warriors numbering 17,000 to 18,000, were waiting. The chase is over. The battle has not yet begun, but Subutai has already won. Dawn, May 31st, 1223. Let's look in detail at the battlefield Subutai chose, because the genius of a strategist is not in being brave. Genius lies in choosing the place where the enemy's bravery works against him. Before the Russian vanguard lies the river Kalka. It is not wide, only 30 to 50 meters, with gently sloping banks convenient for crossing. Not a barrier. Bait. On the eastern bank, in plain sight of the Rus, stands the small Mongol rear guard, no more than 2,000 to 3,000 riders. They look exhausted. They look weak. But the terrain is deceptive. The western bank is a series of hills and ravines, and Subutai knew that the main Russian forces, the camp of Mstislav of Kiev with his 10,000-strong heavy guard, were behind these hills, a day's march away, out of sight. He hid his main forces, fresh 17 to 18,000 warriors, in the ravines and behind the elevations on the eastern bank, invisible, ready. Mstislav the Bold sees only one thing. The enemy has stopped, he is weak, and he is right in front of him. The chronicler states explicitly, because of envy. He said nothing to Mstislav of Kiev, nor to Mstislav of Chernigov. He sent no messengers. He did not wait for the main forces to approach. He wanted all the glory of this easy victory to belong only to him. He gives the order, attack. First into the water plunge the Cumans, thousands of light horsemen. Behind them, the druzhina of Mstislav the Bold himself and the regiments of the young Daniel Romanovich. They force the river crossing and crash straight into the weak Mongol screen. What begins looks like a triumph. The Mongols, as Subutai ordered, flee again. Their rear guard breaks. They turn and gallop away. The young Prince Daniel, only 22 years old, fights with incredible fury. The chronicle notes an amazing detail. He was wounded by a spear in the chest, but due to his youth and wildness, he felt no wounds. He charges forward, his warriors overturning the Mongol ranks. The Rus and Cumans rejoice. They rush after the loot. Their formation breaks, transforming from a battle order into an uncontrollable mob. They are charging straight into the center of the trap. The Cumans and Galicians are already celebrating victory, seeing nothing but the backs of the fleeing enemy. At the moment when the attackers' formation was completely broken, when they had advanced several kilometers from the river, when they were stretched out in pursuit, Subutai gave the signal. From the ravines and hollows, from both flanks, the fresh main forces of the Mongols slammed into the Cumans and Galicians. This was the Tulughma, the classic Mongol tactical maneuver, the envelopment and encirclement. Thousands of Mongol light horsemen burst from cover. Their composite bows hit at 300 meters. They did not engage in close combat. They simply stopped at a safe distance and began to shower the Cumans with a cloud of arrows. Rate of fire, 6 to 8 arrows per minute from each bow. If 5,000 Mongol archers participated in the attack, that is 30,000 to 40,000 arrows per minute. It was a hurricane of death. The whistle of thousands of arrows, screams, thunder of hooves, chaos. While the Cumans, suffering terrible losses from arrows, panicked and tried to turn, the heavy armored Mongol cavalry struck their rear and center. These were not light arrows. These were the veteran Heshig, encased in lamellar armor, on armored horses with lances and sabers. They hit like a hammer on an anvil. The Cumans, who were in the vanguard, broke instantly. The terror-stricken mass of 20 to 30,000 Cuman horsemen turned around and stampeded backwards, straight into their own allies. The chronicle records a terrifying phrase, and the Cumans fled without standing for battle, and they trampled the camps of the Rus princes. They crashed into the retinues of Mstislav the Bold and Daniel Romanovich, who didn't even have time to understand what had happened. Panic, like a virus, transferred instantly. Confidence was replaced by shock. Now this entire mass, Cumans, Galicians, Volhynians, mixed together in wild panic, rushed back toward the Kalka. And on the other bank, Mstislav of Chernigov, unaware of the Bold's plan, was just beginning his crossing with his regiments. The fleeing mob of 40 to 50,000 men crashed straight into his troops who were in the water or just stepping onto the bank. This was no longer a battle. This was a slaughter. Mongol archers gunned down the runners from the flanks. Heavy cavalry cut down those who tried to resist. The Kalka River, as the chroniclers write, became red with blood. Mstislav the Bold, the Lucky, 47 years old, 20 victories behind him, not a single defeat. Now he turned his horse and ran. He was one of the earliest to gallop to the river and throw himself into the water to swim, saving his own life. His luck ran out on the river Kalka. The formation was broken, command was lost, the army ceased to exist. What began was what Subutai did best: total pursuit and annihilation. What started at the Kalka turned into a massacre that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. The Mongols chased and chopped down the maddened warriors. Chronicles say the pursuit continued all the way to the Dnieper. Mstislav the Bold, the initiator of the campaign, the man who executed the Mongol ambassadors, the man who out of envy did not wait for his allies and threw the army into the attack, was the first to reach his boats left on the Dnieper. And he committed the second betrayal of the day. Having crossed with his retinue to the western bank, he ordered all the boats to be chopped up and burned. He did this so the Mongols could not cross and catch him. But by doing so, he doomed thousands of his own warriors, Chernigovians, Volhynians, Smolensk men, Kievans, who were fleeing behind him. He cut off their path to salvation. Most of them died on the banks of the Dnieper, hacked down by Mongol sabers or drowned while trying to swim the river in armor. But the battle was not over. Mstislav Romanovich of Kiev, the Old, the most experienced of the princes, never even entered the fight. He watched the slaughter from his hill on the western bank of the Kalka. His 10,000-strong druzhina was fresh, ready for battle. But he understood. In the open field, against Mongol cavalry, they were finished. He gave the only correct order that day: to build a Wagenburg, a fortified camp made of wagons arranged in a circle on a rocky hill. A 3-day siege began. The Kievans fought back desperately. The Mongols tried to storm it but took losses. Subutai did not hurry. He knew the main flaw of this camp. It stood on a rocky hill away from the river. The besieged had no water. The Kievans wait. They repel attacks. They hope that Mstislav the Bold will return with reinforcements. He will not return. The thirst becomes unbearable. Warriors lick dew from their shields. Lips crack, mouths are full of sand. The Mongols resorted to a trick. They sent a Brodnik, a steppe-dweller and turncoat, named Ploskina, to the princes. He was a Christian and spoke Russian. He came out to the camp, kissing his pectoral cross, and swore to the princes, "If you surrender and lay down your weapons, I swear by the cross your blood will not be spilled. The Mongols will release you in peace for a ransom." Tormented by thirst, seeing that no help was coming, the princes believed the oath. They ordered their men to lay down their weapons. This was the final mistake. The Mongols immediately burst into the camp and slaughtered all the unarmed warriors. 10,000 men were butchered like cattle. And the princes, Mstislav Romanovich of Kiev, his son-in-laws, and other boyars, were seized and bound. And here Subutai showed what Mongol honor meant. He kept the word given through Ploskina. The blood of princes shall not be spilled. The Mongols laid the bound princes on the ground. They covered them with heavy wooden planks and platforms. And then they sat down to feast on top of them. Mstislav Romanovich of Kiev was 58 years old. Behind him were 23 battles. He had never been defeated. He was the Grand Prince of Kiev, the first among the princes of Rus. Now he lay bound on the earth, listening as the victor sat down to feast on the boards above him. The banquet lasted for hours. Under the weight of the Mongol commanders, under the weight of tables, food, and drink, the bones of the princes slowly snapped. Their groans were drowned out by the sounds of celebration, by the laughter of the victors, by the clinking of cups. Thus ended the lives of the great princes of Kiev, ignobly. And Subutai won one of his most brilliant and cruel victories.
The scale of the losses was unimaginable. Of the 80,000-strong army, according to the chronicler, barely a tenth part returned home. Some sources speak of 8,000 survivors, some of 4,000. 12 princes died, including Mstislav Romanovich of Kiev, Mstislav Sviatoslavich of Chernigov, and others. It was the flower of the Russian aristocracy, the most experienced commanders, the bravest warriors. As the chronicles wrote, the land of Rus sits in sorrow. It was not just a battle, it was a catastrophe of national scale. The great raid was complete. He turned his Cuman and marched east to report to Genghis Khan 2 years later. Beyond the Caspian live strong, brave, but tragically divided peoples. They can be conquered. But he was not invincible. Immediately after the Kalka, while attempting to subdue Volga, Bulgaria, his corps was ambushed in the forests and suffered a defeat. The Bulgars lured the Mongols into a dense thicket where their cavalry was useless and inflicted heavy losses on them. This made Subutai not a god, but a man, a genius who learns from mistakes. And at the Kalka, he learned the main lesson. His enemies in the west are strong, rich, brave, but they are tragically divided. He remembered this lesson, and he would return. For Rus, the Kalka became what Cannae was for Rome, a day of the greatest tactical humiliation, when a superior army was surrounded and destroyed by a smaller force. But there was one terrible nuance. After Cannae, Rome rallied, united, and eventually destroyed Carthage. After the Kalka, Rus did nothing. The princes returned home and continued their internecine wars as if nothing had happened. They did not create a unified command. They did not combine forces. They did not prepare for the enemy's return. The Kalka was a warning, but no one heard it. For Subutai, this was merely the first masterpiece in Europe, a perfect demonstration of the tactics of luring and encirclement. He gathered all the necessary data about roads, rivers, cities, the tactics of Russian troops, their weaknesses, and he went east to return 14 years later. In 1237, he will come again, but now it will not be reconnaissance. It will be Batu Khan's invasion, and Rus will pay for the lesson it failed to learn. If at the Kalka, Subutai used the open steppe to destroy an army blinded by a thirst for glory, then in the next battle he faces something completely different. He faces a 150,000-strong army of the Jin Empire, dug into the mountains, in the dead of winter, in a snowstorm. This will be a battle not of maneuver, but of strategy, not of speed, but of calculation. In the next episode, the Battle of San Feng Shan, the master of strategy versus an entire empire. Subutai in the mountains, Subutai in the winter, Subutai against 150,000 enemies, and you will see why he was called the greatest. Subscribe so you don't miss Subutai's next battle. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like button. If you want to see more of these detailed stories, let me know in the comments. And which of Subutai's battles do you consider the greatest? The Kalka was Reconnaissance. The next ones will be real wars. See you in the next episode.